the man you lovingly refer to as Triple H, Hans Herman-Hoppe. And then before the show, we were just chatting, and you did not know that that was the name of a wrestler.
I didn't, and I've been calling him that, and in my head it sounds like a wrestler's name. So there's some subconscious, early to mid '90s shit that I've picked up that made me know that that was a wrestling association. But
yeah, and I searched up Triple H just to get his profile, and I'm like, H may also refer to H. Holmes, one of America's first modern-day serial killers. I mean, this guy sounds like a real jerk.
This one's more of a comment, really.
That was that guy. But yeah, Triple H, you're like, yeah, but your line was, this guy sounds like a wrestler. That's kind of like a wrestling name. I'm like, yeah, it was. You don't know. Yeah. And then they spent like 10 minutes. I'm like, what did that stand for? We're looking it up. I'm like, I think his name was just Triple H. And then it's like Hunter Hearst Helmsley. Okay. But then we went on a real spiral there.
Mm-hmm.
Any frig. We're not going to be talking about Triple H. We're going to be talking about.
Well, we are.
Well, statistically we did.
Yeah, that's true.
If you ask Speaker's Corner, you ask the people, they're going to say that we fucking did. But what we're going to talk about is Hans Herman-Hoppe and his seminal work, Democracy, the God That Failed, which, despite the title, isn't really that radical and revolutionary. Like, if you saw this on the shelf, it sounds crazier than it actually is. It's really not. It's more, I would say it's a lot of people know this, but it's a foundational sort of libertarian ANCAP sort of text. I got into it because I really wanted to get a full-throated defense of monarchy. What I got was a half of a throat, maybe even a quarter of a throat defense.
You got a little cheekful.
Yeah, I got it didn't even get in the throat. It feels like we're going to stumble into something perverted, and I'm just pulling the emergency brake on this right now. We're not going in.
All right.
It's like people are I want to clip this. I'm going to clip this a few minutes ago where people got to listen to this entire shit. So, Democracy, the God That Failed, the economics and politics of monarchy, democracy, and natural order. So, one of the things I would say is this guy Hans Herman-Hoppe, and you know him. You've got some familiarity with him.
Yeah, I mean, I'm embarrassed because that's kind of my scene, but I haven't read him because I'm not a very well-read person, and most of what I know about him and his ideas come through conversation with other people who I can only assume are more read than me, but that in itself is probably a foolish assumption.
Well, he's big in libertarian circles, and he was a huge fan of Ludwig von Mises, who and the Mises Institute, and I believe he's the head of the Mises Institute currently.
Hoppe?
I believe so.
Really?
I believe so. That's what I looked up. I think if you look at, actually, no one look it up. Just believe me, no one ever looked this up. He's the head of the Mises Institute. But he's libertarian. Yes. He defends, in a sense, classical liberalism. He hates socialism. So if I had to put him in any sort of camp, it's like those libertarians who really, really hate socialism. They hate the concept of wealth redistribution. A good chunk of the book is really anti-socialist, kind of like von Mises. Loves free markets and loves property rights. And so you're going to start seeing a lot of if you've listened to libertarians, even the Tea Party and the movement in the West, like you'll see a lot of stuff that came out of this. I'm not sure they all read this guy, but a lot of its proponents would be familiar with this. It hates wealth distribution as a moral and functional concept. And he would make the argument that, and I'll probably get to this a bit later, but the broad strokes would be that the foundation of every functional civilization is property rights. It's the beginning, middle, and end. And if you can't guarantee people's property rights, you don't have a society. And anyway, and there's multiple ways you can do that, but that's it begins and ends with property rights. And there's a lot of concepts in here that might seem popular with Marxists, actually, because he gets into a lot of stuff about co-ops. He's not an individualist. He's not the guy who would say that, it's because that's something that Marxists would critique a lot of libertarians for. It's like, oh, it's just rampant individualism. It's just which is just a mask for greed or corruption and whatnot, and these strange hierarchies.
Yeah.
But he's not like that, because he defends co-ops, he defends communities. He actually mentions very frequently the means of production, and that and co-ops, and people should own the means of production. People need to be working together in a collective, merely just to accomplish things that the individual couldn't. And now I feel that in a lot of ways, maybe the libertarian movement was co-opted by these just hedonistic individualists that don't even like that idea.
100%.
Yeah. And so, like, he gets to this line. He's very, very clear about it, about, even if, and he's very harsh on the concept of the government, which we'll get into. And he's a bit more friendly to a monarchy. And there's people now, like I brought this guy up before, but Curtis Yarvin, he goes by Mencius Moldbug. He's a big fan of this. So you get this sort of breed, and like the Dark Enlightenment guys, the NRX guys might be into this. So it's sort of like this conservative leaning libertarianism, a traditionalist sort of libertarianism, which is an interesting concept, just as a political, a way to do things. But yeah, so they're always on the side of people working together, of having systems of cooperation and laws and rules and boundaries. And he's not against while he might be against the concept of a big bloated nation, he's not against the idea of cooperation, which in essence is something that a lot of like anarcho-socialists or Marxists or any of those deviations would probably agree with. But, I think this guy gets lumped in. It's always libertarian. Fuck him. Fuck him in his ass. And I say, no, halt. Do not fuck Hans Herman-Hoppe in the ass. Leave his ass clean. I don't know. Unpenised.
Yeah. His virgin ass.
I'm going to clip this. There's going to be like all the hashtags. I'm going to get like a lot of the people like, oh, this guy does a good deconstruction of this. And it's like, do not penis this man's ass.
This is how we do book reviews.
Review. I don't even want to call them book reviews. I don't even call them deep dives. You know what? It's just a chat amongst friends. And I'm going to tell you, in the future, in the next little series we're going to do, I want to take a deeper dive on anarchism. I actually have some books coming in to explore anarchism as a concept. I think I got Emma Goldman's shit coming in. Anyway, we'll get into that later. But we're giving everyone a fair shake, and in this, even if I might not agree with some of the conclusions, I think there's a lot in this book that is very poignant and very interesting, and people should know it. If only to recontextualize what I think, like we both agree, libertarianism, at least in the West, is seen as almost a meme belief system. Like, you think of libertarianism, you think, oh, is that Count Dankula? Is that like a guy with a big wee chest tattoo, naked on stage? Say, like that whole fucking, what was that meme? It's I'm a libertarian. I want my same-sex gay neighbors to grow their weed crops and protect it with AR-15, like that sort of, like that word jumble. I'm like, that's
which is so sad, because that is actually a although humorous, a fair representation of what they believe, but it's so fucking memey.
Yeah. Well, there was another Republican guy who did something like that recently. I'm going to paraphrase, but he took that to the next level, which is like, I want my gay neighbor's trans son to be able to say the N-word while shooting their gay, like, it just went weird. Like, if you believe, hey, this is my America, this is libertarian America, I want my gay neighbor's trans son to scream slurs.
I do want my gay neighbor's trans son to be able to say the N-word, but I also want to be able to say the N-word. And if that little faggot comes on my lawn, I want to be able to threaten him with my AR-15.
See, this is society.
We live in a society.
We're living. Right. Just before we go, there was that whole thing, we live in a society, the Joker thing. I was talking to this guy online, and he was talking about he's now Martin. He's a friend of the show. He's a military-minded guy, and he did this big long statement about counterinsurgency warfare, and he had this. He started out by describing people like people exist in a time and a place, and wherein, and I'm like, I just want to snag that and make that the new thing. People exist in a time and a place. Just have that out there.
Yeah, that is.
the next thing we're going to muscle into the zeitgeist. Okay, sorry. Back on track. We're not fools. This isn't a bad show. All right, so he has this idea early on when he starts off by sort of defending the monarchy. Later on, he gets in this concept of natural law, which is where maybe a possibly more libertarian, anarchistic, sure, why not, becomes more popular. But he starts by defending the monarchy. What is the monarchy? How does it function? How is it actually constructed? Because there exists this idea as the monarchy as a placeholder for a corrupt king. Or even worse, the modern royal family, just an ineffectual, falling apart thing you kind of laugh at, or you see as just merely a source for drama. Like they see the royal family merely as a reality show. Now, that's not what it's supposed to be, obviously. But he has this idea. So, what is a civilization? His idea of a good civilization is that a civilization works when it has a low time preference. So he looks at it like that, almost like a human being. And there's that concept of teaching children about time preference. You could have something good now, or you could have more good things later. You know what I mean? And you can tell like the intelligence and the maturity of a child if they can delay gratification in that way. So a civilization works, and a high trust society works when you are doing things now for something better later. And you can only do that if your society is stable. See, if you can conceptualize a longer future, and the longer the future you can conceptualize, the lower time preference you have. The idea that you're willing to sacrifice more now because you're certain that in like 100 years it's going to pay off and things are more stable. And that's kind of the concept of wealth. You get into this debate with people like, what is being rich versus being wealthy? You know, because people can get rich and fuck it up, but it really comes down to time preference. Like you give a person who doesn't understand the concept of wealth a lot of money, they'll spend it right away because they psychologically don't understand it. But society works when you have a good time preference where you're offloading something into the future. And the idea of a monarch or something that's more stable, a monarchy or a system that isn't always changing up every 4 years or going through these constant cycles. It could have a farther time preference. It can set further horizons. And I remember there's this line, people might not like this because the Catholic Church has a bit of a checkered, conception these days. But, they said the Vatican would always try and think 1,000 years into the past and 1,000 years into the future for every decision it makes. Now, all the problems aside, all the dramas, all the controversies, that is an interesting idea that you're so stable for every decision you make. You have to really consider tradition and also possible outcomes and scenarios. Now, that is completely destroyed in a democratic republic. And we'll get into this later, but the entire concept of we're going to elect a guy and every 4 years he might change. Like it's always in a state of flux. And you're convinced of the idea that as long as the more state of flux something is in, the better it is, which is an odd thing. No. We take that for granted, but most people don't actually try and unpack that and realize how strange that is. So he goes in this part. I'm just going to read this little part here. It's like, there's the concept of the aristocracy and the elites. Elites are elected through their qualities. And you used to see this even in some democratic republics. I remember when we were reading, Edmund Burke talking about, he was a Whig, talking about how he used to have politicians who were like former soldiers or scientists or people of renown and note who kind of become politicians later, successful people who do that, versus what we have now, which is just young lawyers, which is the worst person you could have running things. But he basically says they're elected through their qualities. These are how elites are naturally elected. Elites naturally emerge in any system based on their courage or their competency or intelligence or maybe even empathy. But it's like a mass or majority cannot be elected as a leader, which is kind of where the Marxists kind of try to struggle with things. So really it only occurs through war or revolution. And, this is how you get a democracy and what he calls caretakers. You don't really have leaders in a democratic republic like we have now. You have caretakers. They have no ownership over anything. And that's an interesting way to conceptualize it, because a monarchy, traditionally, this is for good and bad, because I'll get to the part where people don't like. If you're a monarch, you own everything. Everything is your ownership of your little kingdom. So you own all the property and you technically own all the people. But because you have ownership over it, you actually you're more invested in its health. Now, if you're a caretaker, if you're just someone who comes in and it's this big system, all I'm doing is kind of maintaining it and sweeping it up, you actually have no investment in making it work long term.
Specifically, if you're there and the incentive that you have is, for example, a paycheck, or as a democratic leader, it's some golden parachute to a corporation after the end of your second term, your incentive is to do the absolute bare minimum that you can get away with while maximizing your pay after the position ends. The day you start, you're already looking at the day you leave, which is only a few years away. That's
and especially a democratic republic, because the argument would say, he says this later, but I'll just say now, like, and there might be something to prove this wrong. I'm leaving that open, but he makes a comment that I really enjoy, which is no serious political thinker in the history of humankind has endorsed democracy. None. I can't, and I'm thinking of them because I've read a few. I haven't read them all. I've read philosophers, and not a single one has like true democracy. We don't even have that, even though we say we do.
Knowing with my understanding of Hoppe, I think that's probably like a tongue-in-cheek, no true Scotsman type thing, right? He's essentially saying, if you think that this works, you're a fucking idiot.
Yeah,
that's what he's saying. Is like you're not a serious political philosopher.
But even the people who say, that's the word we have now. We're a democracy. We live in a democracy. The people on January 6th were trying to take down democracy. I'm like, well, first of all, we don't live in Americans and Canadians especially don't live in a democracy. America. It's a democratic republic. It's republicanism, and in Canada, it's parliamentary politics, which is different than an actual democracy. Democracy exists as this thing we say, but no one really has it. It's not direct. And that's something that the leftists and the Republicans are actually trying to do now. Like, destroy the Electoral College, make it, that's every step towards the direct vote and shit like that. Like, they're trying to make it more just actual democracy, which we've never had. That's never existed. So it would be a new thing you're trying out. So, but anyway, the point was, if you have no ownership, and like you had said, a great point, that if you're a short window of time, you actually have a far higher time preference. You have, like, your time is limited. There's only so much you can do. You have no ownership over anything. You actually really can't change anything. And that's something Barack Obama said. I remember on Mark Maron's podcast, that the very important podcast that no one really listened to, but he had said, one of the features of this system is that you can't really like jerk if you're steering the ship. You can't jerk the wheel in any direction. That's part of the system. But if you go in knowing that you're a politician, you can't really change anything yourself ever by design, and you've got a short window of time. So there are no horizons. We talked about horizons before. Like, where are you actually steering this democracy or this democratic republic? Like, it doesn't even fucking matter. It's wasting your time even thinking about that. So, it's all these and people will criticize businesses about this, but only thinking in quarterly returns. I agree with that. I agree that but I think that the way you would criticize the business world for thinking short term, you could equally criticize the government. Because it's not just as short term, but around the same time as a short term. Like presidents, politicians, a lot of times, some of them just kind of get stuck there forever. But realistically, you don't have any ownership over the system. And the idea of a monarch, and this is something that I think is lost on people. It's really driven through in this book, that monarchs still serve a supreme law. And I'm going to talk about this at the end. There's this guy I like named Jay Dyer. I mentioned him on the past episode, and he had a conversation with this guy named Jefferson Lee. This would have been in 2018. The video is called Monarchy versus Democracy. It's on his channel, and he was talking about how a lot of these monarchies, they would serve a supreme law. So it's not like the monarch is just some wild dictator. He or she, most likely he, was in service of these higher ideals, immutable laws that even the king can't just change, and these were woven deeply into the culture. And kingdoms traditionally fall when the king becomes a despot. He becomes a tyrant and starts making all the rules and knocking the pillars down of society, and betraying the elites. And that's actually how a lot of monarchies did fall in the 20th century. But so conversely, While in a traditional monarchy, the monarch, despite having all this ownership and power, still serves a higher law. In the case of Jay Dyer, it would be sort of the Christian imperium, you know, and under the Christian imperium, you would still have, you know, nations and stuff, but you would still have that. There's still things that you couldn't change. But in a democracy, everything can be changed. And in fact, if things change more and more quickly, it's seen as better. You know what I mean? So it's almost it's complete inversion of this system. So democracy, yeah, they can make all kinds of new laws. And here's something to think about. And again, I'll get into this later in another way. But think of America. Now, America is very anti-monarchy. And it's brought up a lot. You know, we don't have a king. And at one point, Washington wanted to become a king. How crazy was that? But if you think about how most Americans across the political spectrum there, they still talk about the founding fathers as if they were monarchs. Because I see leftists and liberals and Republicans and people on the right talking about the founding fathers. You know, this is what the founding fathers would have wanted. This is what they made America to be. Despite the fact that they were against monarchy, they fulfill the function of an aristocracy or a monarchy. You've made these men, again, who pretty much did this to get away from the monarchy. You still look to them in the same fashion you would a king. They represent the immutable laws of the nation. And that's really the only thing people are clinging to in America, the Constitution. And people would, you know, critique that as saying that this is just a fucking legal document. But it's being treated as the fucking Magna Carta. It's being treated as this, like, divine right. And that's curious, because the idea is if you do away with the monarchy and you do away, some would argue, with a religious monarchy, people are just going to fill it with something else. So what they filled it with is the founding fathers, who they probably don't even know anything about. They revere them as they are a concept.
But and that's really important. It's funny in the context of people always saying, you know, Americans have no culture. But I mean, the founders and the framers are the ancient kings of the Americans, right? If you put it in that concept, if you treat them as if they have some historical legitimacy, these are the ancient kings. These are the people whose faces are on coins and carved on the inside of tombs, and they mean something. Even to the illiterate and the uneducated, it fucking means something. It's the tie that binds. You can't take that away. Yeah, and exactly. So the point is, if you have this system that's supposed to be really sterile in that sense, and it doesn't include that, you've lost the core part. A core mechanism that allows you to rule in a legitimate way.
Yeah, and another point he makes that I thought was interesting on the topic of monarchy is a separation between the ruled and the rulers that everyone knows actually creates an even sharper class consciousness. And that means that the rulers owe their existence to keeping the masses happy. Now, I would say that many leftists and maybe a lot of people on the right would still argue that we live in a class society in many different ways. I would argue that that's true, but it's so fogged by this deception of choice and the deception of democracy that, you know, the class consciousness gets so muddied. But at least with a monarchy, it's very sharp. There's your rulers. You know them because they wear a fancy cape, and if you're not happy, that's the guy you got to kill. And this democracy, in this democratic republic, you could argue the exact same power structures exist, but there's still this belief that you can't. I know this will sound very glowy and Fed posty, but you know deep down, like, I can't shoot anyone to change anything. At least with the monarchy, it's like I shoot that guy and then things might fall apart and we'll have to start over. But you know, that exists. Like, you know. And
carrying on with being a fucking a glow fella, a glow jogger. There are people you can shoot. You just don't know who they are because they don't wear capes. That's the issue. That's part of the problem with this. Like, not only do we know, I mean, we don't know who they are, so we don't know how to shoot them. But it's hard for us to even get angry. Like, we were saying this earlier about how, you know, like you were saying that with the Obama and then with Hillary and with Bush, that people just say, oh, it'd be great. I may not agree with him, but it'd be great to just have a beer with him. As if to say, he's like my brother, he's like my neighbor, I can at least really get along with this guy, I can relate, he's one of us. He's not one of you. He's literally a fucking demigod. Do you not get that? When people in history, and they write about fucking Heracles, that's George Bush, that's him, man. And I'm not like, I'm trying to say I like the guy, but like, from a functional standpoint, that's who he is. He could kill you and your entire family with a wink,
Yeah, and
Like-
endorsements, and then no one would know. Like, and
Yeah, and no one exactly, and no one would know. And then the next day, your neighbor would still say, "Oh,
like,
I
you
have
want
a
to talk
beer
about
with him."
the Hillary
So-
Clinton thing. The thing that bothers a lot of people deep down about Hillary Clinton, and I'm not trying to get off on this whole conspiracy thing, but there is a lot of realistic and factual insane shit that Clintons have done. You know, and it doesn't take a conspiracy theorist to say it, but the idea is like she represents something. I think people were repulsed by that. People in America aren't really repulsed by the concept of dynasties. They actually like dynasties. They would love the idea of Jay-Z and Beyonce having some kind of functional dynasty that's rich and powerful in America. But what they don't like in politics is like kind of when they show their hand that they are essentially aristocrats, but they're not accountable. That's Hillary Clinton. That's a lot of these really powerful politicians. They serve the same purpose as an untouchable aristocracy, but they don't wear a cape. And they're selling you on this fiction, like you just said. You could have a beer with them. George Bush. Oh, look at him. He draws sad clowns now. Whoa. Oh, look at him. He's just like my brother. No, he's not. He's not. You can't just put him in a cowboy hat and make you believe
He's a mythical figure.
and that's what we always said. Like the idea of kind of like the downtrodden everyman is over time just becoming a mask that rich people wear. Like there's no such thing as a naturally torn denim pant in America. There's no naturally torn denim pant in America. It's all made that way by not even like a poor Chinese kid. It's made by a rich Korean guy in LA.
The red herring is I have one pair of real naturally torn denim pants, and I framed them.
I mean, that's because you're a poor fag, though. So.
Yeah, I am.
But and so the other thing he takes target at, and this is something I really like, the idea of people hating the government. Now, I don't like the idea that hating the government only becomes the purview of anarchists and Marxists, because everyone should hate the government. Everyone should hate the government we have now. This sort of neoliberal contraption we have now. And that's not to say you hate the concept of having order in society or a hierarchy or a monarchy, things like that. But this mishmash, this bucket of slop we have right now is not a government. It's the worst part of every fucking thing. So he had said, so he takes aim at the concept of a government divorced from a monarchy and divorced from any higher authority. So he says in government, and this is a guy who loves private property, you see the gradual erosion of private law and an increasing reliance on vague public law, where again, nobody's held accountable for anything, yet private rights are continually eroded. And these laws are not immutable either. And think of like the laws, the neoliberal laws we've seen over the past few, like these are laws that punish you, that exclusively strip you of rights, but they're not actually set in stone. They can always evolve to get worse, and that's by design. That's a feature, not a bug to these things, and that's seen as better by some people. Isn't that crazy? That at the very least you need to have, we have some laws like you're not allowed to kill people. That's pretty much it. Like that's pretty much the only thing anyone believes in anymore. The one rule is we talked about this last time. As long as people aren't shooting each other, everything's hunky-dory. And I really want people to unpack that idea. Like, no, you're having your rights and freedoms taken away in favor of this very abstract public law that no one really understands and is always morphing. That's death. That's you look to the sky. All I see is cancer. You know, so that means once again, what this communicates subconsciously to people is that there is no certain future. There is no long horizon. There is nothing we can count on or really believe in because we've internalized this idea that everything's in flux because we're taught that anything that's like set in stone and traditional is corrupt and it's an old tree we got to cut down, you know? But that's the only thing that has any sort of citizen trusting in society, trusting in each other, and planning long-term for the future, and maybe even having a shot at a civilization. Because right now it seems that this government, scare quote government, it's only kept in place by what people believed a monarchy was, which is fucking jackboots in the streets, an labyrinthine Kafka-esque, list of punishments and rules that's always changing every year. You don't know. People are breaking the law more and more by accident. We talked about that guy who got his fucking kid taken away for and going to jail for misgendering his daughter. And that's going to change. It's going to get worse. Like what can that guy count on? What can that guy invest in? What society actually is this? So, and again, we talked about that book Bowling Alone by Robert Putnam. If you live in a low trust society with a fucked up time preference and no horizon you can count on, how can you have anything but chaos? And then all you live for in that government, in this government, this democratic republic we have now, is hoping that the government invents new types of guns to keep the peace. There is no such thing as natural peace. It can't be. It's just a low level of hostility and conflict, and the dream that some billionaire will come and invent a new type of robot to make us calm down a little bit. Outside of that, everything is just, that's why people are fucking killing themselves. And it's an opioid epidemic. It's this other stuff. Anyway, continue.
I want to touch on that for a second, though, because there is a natural type of peace, which I think right-wing anarchists, right-wing libertarians are very keen on, which is, and if maybe you've heard the adage before that nations that don't trade will go to war, right? The idea that if you have a trade relationship, if you rely on somebody else for a service or a product or something, then you're not liable to fight them, because if you were to fight them, you lose, right? It's even if you win the war, you lose because you lose your barber, or you lose if you feud with your neighbor, but you were trading with your neighbor prior to that, you would lose everything you were trading. So the idea that as a starting point for a peaceful civilization, you make sure that the whole civilization is structured around, whether it's classes or hierarchies or the family structure or religion or whatever, people have real meaningful reasons to rely on each other. Because as long as people are relying on each other, and again, and with the right wingers, this cuts right down to private property. Like, I have something and you have something, and let's figure out a way that is equitable and fair, that we can trade this thing, we can work together as a team, and as a result of that, we'll never have to fight. And this goes across racial and class and religious lines. Like, I'm not going to go kill a Muslim if he's the only guy with good corn feed or whatever, and I need that for my cattle. I'm not. Well,
and this is why he mentions that in talking about the monarchy, which is, we talked about how the monarch or the aristocracy has full ownership over everything and everyone, and in an almost Ayn Randian sort of way, their selfishness is what keeps things stable. So you raised an idea like nations that can't trade end up conflict. So you would see these monarchies were traditionally not as expansionist as you would think, because it's like, okay, I want something over there that guy's got. Now, what I can do is I could sacrifice all my stuff. These are my people. And I can go to war and I would lose all my stuff. I would lose money. Or what I could do is enter in some kind of contract. And this is what you used to see in kingdoms all the time. You would see actually an increase in contractual trade. You would see people marry into kingdoms. That seems kind of feudalistic now, but the idea was like, we're trying to build an accord. And you'd see this in like fucking Aboriginal tribes too. Like, here's how we would kind of like marry and mix our families together, and now we're one kingdom, and it's not just contractual. So you would have these built in to avoid conflict, because you saw it as like, I would be sacrificing all my stuff, and if I spend money on something, that's my money. I don't want to waste my money.
I think the dowry system is something that, not just the dowry system, but I mean that attitude, right, is something that really exemplifies this. Like, if you want to make sure that you never are in a position where you kill someone, what you do is you give him your daughter. Yeah. I have a daughter. I understand that. The last guy whose house I'm going to bomb is the guy whose son is married to my daughter, and my fucking daughter lives in that house. Yeah. I will never go to war with him. I will find some other way to negotiate. Yeah.
Well, and right? Back to just to mention the point I was saying is like, taxes were also relatively low in these sorts of situations. And people mention this all the time, like, oh, hundreds of years ago, people actually worked less and were taxed less and got to keep more of their money. Now, the amount of money they have was relatively low, whatever. But, taxes are relatively low, and most of it went to the military to defend it. But also, like, it wasn't like, he's like, okay, even if I tax people at 100%, that's my money. I would have to spend it all in trying to take something over, and that's a whole fucking headache. So it's like, in a way, just a fun way to think about this is, if it's a monarchy, that concept of ownership and that concept of permanent ownership might mean that you engage with the world in a nicer way, because contrary to that, you'll have, again, a democratic republic. You're only here for a short amount of time. You're not actually trying to increase the wealth of your country. You're trying to increase income, because, and just like a business, just like a corporation that measures everything by quarter, you want to be the guy when they look at the fucking broken line chart of that company. It's like, when I was there, it was up. I don't care if it goes down for the next guy. In fact, I hope it goes. I hope it goes down for the next guy, and that I look better. But that ultimately, the corporation suffers, the business suffers. So if you're like a president, anything bad that happens to Biden, you can tell Trump's gonna like it. But you know what? If something bad happens to Biden, that means it's happening bad for America. You know what I mean? It's like, and so you end up, I don't want to give an whole thing, but it's like you're cheering for these superheroes you've elected, and the only one that loses is you. Like, if the guy you hate fucks up, that means your taxes go up, like fucking gas going up under Biden. It's like $3 a fucking gallon or whatever. It's like, haha, Trump, what happens? Like, you're still paying that though. So let's remember that, we're not voting just for mascots here. But however, that's the idea that in this book, how he conceptualizes how these sorts of arrangements and dowries and things would work, which is interesting.
I think it's critical, because look, he takes a lot of flack. Even you were saying at the beginning that you read this book to get a full-throated apologist view for the monarchy, and you didn't get that, because that's not really what the book is about. Again, I haven't read the book, but I know a bit about his philosophy. But the idea is, there are core components. If I can summarize this, there's core components of monarchy and of many other ancient systems of government that we've lost, and that they were valuable. And it's maybe one of these cases where we didn't understand why they were valuable, so we got rid of them in the name of progress and modernity. But the idea that you have a leader, and he's there for life, and not only is he there for life, but in all likelihood the next leader will be his son and then his grandson. That guy has a very long view at making sure this place is stable and healthy. And if stable and healthy means that the population is healthy, that's one thing. But if it's one thing when the population is 250 million people, most of whom will never see his face. But it's another thing when he's a duke of a small fiefdom in the Middle Ages, and its population is 1,500 people, and most of them pay him directly in corn. Right? This is a very different thing. This is something now where you have to take a direct, immediate approach. You have to be literally, kissing hands and shaking babies in a genuine way, right? And you have to keep people actually happy, because there is always, the sword of Damocles is very, very real.
Yeah, and that's a good point, because I spent a lot of time on the monarchy here just because there's some interesting ideas, but really what he's getting at is the concept of natural law. So he would say that the monarchy is a bit closer to what he prefers, which is natural law. Democratic republics are so far away and twisted up, it's just destructive. Now, he would probably take a monarchy over that, but what he would ideally like is this sort of anarchist compounds. And that's, in fact, I'm kind of skipping ahead here, that's what he recommends. He had said that if you don't have the right to secede from the nation, you're not free, which is true. I was thinking about this the other day. Like, as Quebec has tried to leave Canada twice. A lot of people don't know that. And the second time it came close, because you had to leave Canada, they do a nationwide vote.
Isn't that funny? Isn't that funny that whether or not Quebecers are allowed to leave gets decided by us Anglos in Ontario? Isn't that funny?
They need to win. Yeah. Yeah. And that gets, and then they only lost by 1%. The final count was
to clarify what that means. That means all Quebecers wanted to leave, and
or
an
it might have been
enormous minority of the rest of us also wanted them to leave.
Something crazy.
Most of us, from a moral standpoint, we all fucking wanted to separate.
Yeah, and they vote, and it also got close. You know what I mean? In America, it might be harder, but I'm like, this, no. If it's 50-50, they should be able to leave anyway. But the idea is, if you're not able to secede, you're not really free. And what kind of fucked up system are you living in? But also, he said, if you were to secede, he talks about this later on in the book, what would happen if we were to balkanize. And the problem is, I'm kind of skipping ahead here, but the problem is that there are no natural leaders. So when he talks about natural law, we talk about how hierarchies can emerge. And like what you were talking about, like the monarchy is just an extension of the natural law. Like you got to, but you know, when you're raising a family and you have your land and your property, your private property, you're thinking long term. You're thinking about your next generations. You're thinking about your family the way a monarch or an aristocracy would think of their kingdom, right? And so you can't just swap. You know, someone, if you went out and some guy just came in and started taking care of your family, you think he's going to have their best intentions in mind, or is he going to try and figure out how to take his money and run, and anything that goes wrong, pass it on to you when you come back? You know what I mean? That's kind of what it is. So like the monarchy is just an elevated version of the natural law, which is working together, working in a community. I have my family. I want my kids to marry off to good people, to good families, and then we can become joined and blah blah blah. And there is a peace there, there is a cooperation, and you know that's the system. And so a monarchy is just the elevated version of that. And you know you're all underneath the supreme law or God or history or gods, whatever that might have been. And it kind of builds up from that. And this kind of ties into one idea he had that I really thought about, just the idea of natural hierarchies and naturally expanding. Like you're not just an individual. If you're just an atomized individual, that's actually not natural.
This is
a lot of people want that in relationship to the fucked up system we have now. Like I need to check out of that. Like we idolize the lone wolf just because we hate the system so much. But this is one idea that he mentioned, and I like to think of it like there is, and it's something that kind of troubled him because he's not really a nationalist in that sense, because he had said, you know, he believes in that there's such a thing as a people. You know, there is a race, there is a people, there is a community, there is like this certain side. And what happens is people tend to trend towards centralization to a point. And he makes a good point where he's like, you know, Germany used to be around 200 separate city states. And you start off with tribes, you start off, and over time, its connections are built and vectors merge, and you kind of stop. It seems to have naturally stopped. So there is a trend towards centralization. There is a trend towards cooperation and unifying kingdoms, but there is a ceiling. And I don't know exactly what that ceiling is, but I think we're seeing what happens when it gets too big. And I'll give you a couple examples just to think about. So that's kind of the idea of the EU. So over hundreds of years, all these German tribes, they eventually formed this thing called Germany. And they say, we're a unified people. We have enough similarities to separate us from the French or the British, you know what I mean? Or any of those people. And that's, we kind of settled on this. But and this was what the USSR ran into. It's like, okay, why don't we just group you all together into one thing? But they went beyond the ceiling. They said, okay, we have enough differences and enough internal nationalism to not want to get that big. That's kind of what we're dealing with the EU. And I would even argue that's what they're dealing with in America. Yeah. The idea that naturally these states seem to have formed. They have enough people, like Texas has enough personality to just be Texas, and it can't get really any bigger or smaller without causing problems. But it can't exist in this huge umbrella. It seems to be where the umbrellas are where we get, and we kind of reject that. That's Brexit. And we're seeing that's the idea of balkanization. Balkanization, and all the 20th century was you tried to bring this together, and it naturally broke apart.
States of America. Right? They don't have a name. We don't call them Libertania or some dumb shit. They're the United States, and there's a discrete number of them, and the walls and the rules between them are supposed to be distinct. And we even call them states. Like, what is Canada? Canada is a state. It's a state. The United States of America is a union of states, of nations. That's how this is totally mimetic that we don't even think of it that way, but that was the whole point, and that's how things should. This is almost a Hoppian concept in and of itself. The idea that these states didn't have a legitimate reason to go beyond that ceiling of unionization. They had one reason, which was fight the British Empire. Okay? So they made a union, and the purpose of the union was all of these disparate states who couldn't agree on anything else could at least agree on one thing, that we need to band together to fuck the British in the ass, which they did promptly. And then it grew into a fucking cancerous federal thing that we can all see today, right? But the EU is... Yeah. Carry on.
Yeah. Yeah, well, let me just say this on that. I would say on that topic, Jay Dyer actually made a funny point about this. But if you look at how America was started, just to accelerate your point, if you look at the founding fathers, the idea of having a nation that was broadly Christian was a totally new idea. It's like, oh, it could be Protestant and Catholic, and Ben Franklin was pretty much a Satanist. And it's like, but we could all get along and everything. And it's like, we can be this disjointed people unified for a common cause. And it's like, that was such a wild new idea. But they called it the American experiment. I'm not sure that worked out. America's a great example of what happens when you get these kings, these separate kings who have these wildly different beliefs.
Okay, so my point is back to your original concept. You're talking,
and they make this legal document. That's
again, let's say Dark Age Germany.
Yeah,
Dark Age Germany, as an example, has 10,000 tribes. I don't know if that's accurate, but let's just say that. And by the Middle Ages, they've turned into 200 city-states. All right, and by the 19th century. Again, I'm not a history buff. Maybe it is 20 states. And then we get into the Austro-Hungarian Empire, which is even larger than modern-day Germany during the First World War. That breaks up. We wind up with Germany. And then that itself gets broken up during the Second World War, and part of it becomes part of the Soviet Union. The point is that at all of these points, I think a good starting reference in terms of the ceiling for government is essentially Dunbar's number. It's somewhere between 200 and 300 human beings. Beyond that number, you need a really strong justification for why somebody you've never met and can't personally know has direct control over your life. Now, that's not to say there are no justifications for it, but it's no longer a simple issue of you're my neighbor and you married my daughter, right? It gets beyond that. So we're talking about the U.S. They had a reasonable justification at that point, which was to fight the British. And the reason it was an experiment was, and this is totally my interpretation, but the good concept would have been, we're disparate states. We don't want to have to get into bed with each other, but we do need each other's help to fight this larger enemy. So let's form a pact that on the one hand says the things that we're going to do together as a team to fight this other guy, but on the other hand has a whole list of things that we're not allowed to do to each other because we're not family, we don't like each other, and we are not a country. And that's the whole thing, the whole point of the Constitution about, like, to say the right to the whole idea of a militia, right? The whole point to a militia is to prevent the federal government from existing, essentially, in its current form.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because Jay Dyer, I mentioned him just because there is some synergy between this and what he was talking about. So he would say that, and I actually agree with this, if you want to have any sort of unity, you need to have a higher principle. So you could have alliances between these states. That's kind of how these countries came about. Like they said, we have enough in common. There's enough, coherence there. Like we can just make one big alliance and have one big fucking name, essentially. But you need to have a higher ideal. Now, here's what's interesting about America that he brought up, that the ideal, you have these disparate groups, you have these men and these ideas and these different sects of Christianity, different beliefs, thinking they can come together on these one principles. However, what is that one founding principle? And some would argue that founding principle is rebellion. Now, that's the only thing you're uniting over is the concept of rebellion. And even when you harken back to an older American identity, rebellion is in its DNA. I would argue that for the American man, rebellion is still the DNA.
And I really want to focus on this.
Anti-monarch. But can you actually unite over that? Does that make any sense?
Have this concept, right? If you say, well, the principle that we united around was rebellion, and now we as a larger people are united around rebellion. No, you missed the fucking plot. The point is, rebellion is a one category among many, and you as states are united on rebellion, but you are not united on a million other things. And the concept of a compact, this is why I say it's Hoppian. I feel like, and again, my interpretation is the original concept of the American experiment was, let's form a compact that says we are united in our rebellion against the British, but we are specifically, explicitly not united on everything else. Don't get on my fucking lawn. That was the idea. That's why it's called the United States, and it's not, doesn't have a name as a nation. It wasn't a bunch of provinces coming together. They are separate, distinct, explicit states. They're united in rebellion, and then now we have this, and it's hilarious. It's sad, exactly like you said, that modern Americans say, "Oh no, we're we're all Americans. We're all together in this because of our rebellious nature. That's true, but that is literally the only thing you have in common. And because it's the only thing you have in common, you should immediately look into separating from each other, because you're killing each other, which is the federal government.
Yeah. The one thing you're not rebelling against is probably the thing you should be rebelling against. But yeah, exactly. But the funny, if we are to maintain this idea of a nation, if that's the one thing that you have, well, that destroys the thing, ironically. But his point was, okay, if you want to go back to natural law, let's say, and we talked about this earlier, and I do have to get going soon to eat some more scrambled eggs. But the idea is like, if you were to secede, let's say Quebec secedes, let's say you have to go back to this sort of syndicalism, because you're going to leave that order. You need to kind of recreate your own order. So you can't just secede and like take parts of that with you. Like, imagine you secede and go back to this sort of co-op syndicalism, and you pretty much need to rebuild from scratch. And I would say this to any of the Marxists, any of the fascists, anyone listening who wants to kind of secede, like, you're going to have to realize that we have to kind of start, like this guy's saying, kind of start with a libertarian anarcho-syndicalist framework, and then kind of refine your hierarchies, because he makes a good point that every revolution requires a few uncommon men, and they essentially, like we talked about last time with the insurrectionist movement, you have the idea of a revolution is kind of uncoordinated, just a mass scream, but then an insurrection is these uncommon, exceptional men who help guide it. But it does require mass participation. You do need to be of the people. No matter what, even if you don't like the people, if you think the people are grug-brained and they're brainwashed and blah, 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 if you don't have those people, you have nothing. So let's start with that. And you need to kind of go into this, treat it like a syndicalist project, where let's imagine starting a breakaway civilization with these people. How the fuck would you do it? How would you start with cooperation? How would you start with these shared ideals that they really need to believe in, to the point where they'll not only defend it, but build an entire hierarchy around? What are the immutable laws? When you elect a leader, why wouldn't that leader just become a despot? I don't
see it as distinct in any way from what we already have. I don't understand that, and I hear that very often, because I am one of these people, and I don't understand why that's such a big ask. Why saying you have a society with 10 degrees of hierarchy, if you cut the 10th layer off and keep the other 9, you don't have to rebuild from the bottom. This is like people in Brexit saying our entire economy is going to collapse once we separate from the EU. First of all, no, because you're completely self-contained. Second of all, most of the things we're getting from the EU, tomorrow you can just get a new trade agreement with them. Yes, the prices will be different, but you're acting like the sky is falling, like the whole world's going to blow up and you have to rebuild from scratch. No, you don't. Is your neighbor, your Polish neighbor, going to move out? Is he going to stop being a plumber and now he's going to be an electrician? No, none of that changes. Nothing has changed.
The only reason I say that is because if what you're proposing seems so diametrically opposed to, let's just call it the neoliberal order, even if you don't break away, they will persecute you to such a way where you might have to break away, even for your own survival. That's the only reason I say that.
And I agree. But then you've kind of moved the goalposts a little bit, because now you're talking about an outside force that's antagonizing you. It has nothing to do with your own principles. It has nothing to do with your plan. Your plan is fine. It's somebody else realized that your plan is going to fuck them in the ass and they're coming after you. And now you have to fight them. That doesn't mean that your plan is wrong. In fact, it's probably a justification. It probably explains to you how right your plan is.
Yeah, I was just saying, like, if you wanted to start, like, let's start our own province or something. Basically, this is what the reserve system has to do. Like, they have to figure out, while they're still kind of connected, they still have to figure out how to do things for themselves and have their own unique hierarchies, which justify the reason it exists apart anyway. All I'm saying is that there's going to be people who might be on your side, who might be on, like, what are the actual things you're in service of? How can you have a functioning cooperative kind of syndicalism if you're not serving this higher idea and not just a bunch of nomads living in the same area?
Talking about Texas or about Quebec, right? If either one of them seceded, would that be the end of Texas? Would it be the end of Quebec? Or would it just be a change in the rules? Would it just, the only thing on a day-to-day for a normal person living in one of those provinces or states, it would essentially be if you decided to actually go out of province, out of state, there would be a different procedure at the border. And aside from that, you might have minor price deflation and inflation on CPI basket goods. Everything else would be the same. Nothing would actually change. I'm not convinced anything else would change.
I would say let's say Texas breaks away tomorrow and things kind of still go on as according to normal. The reason that would happen is because there's still enough of the people in that system who are like the previous system where it can provide a smooth transition. You almost, by necessity, you need to separate yourself. For example, let's say Texas secedes. There's a ton of liberals in Texas, which would just eventually, over time, turn Texas back into the reason they wanted to leave, which was to not become California. So within Texas, you're going to need to decide, are we anti-liberal? And we need to kick these people out so they can't just change it from within. Okay. Now, but you can't just be anti-liberal. That's not a higher purpose you're serving. I'm not talking about God. I'm talking about like a higher principle you're serving. So like, what is Texas? That's the thing. I think if Texas seceded, you wouldn't see a huge difference. It wouldn't be as dramatic as you think, because I think the rot is too deep in Texas. I think Texas talks a big game about being like this really unique thing. I don't think it actually is. However, if you were to break away, almost by survival purposes, you need to be separate. Otherwise, why wouldn't you just get swallowed back up over like 25 years? So you need to almost make sure you know why you're doing this, and not just be, like I said, just a group of nomads hanging out. Like, you need to figure out so you don't just get swallowed back up. This is
not a solution, but just something that I think would happen right out of the gate. So if you're looking at Texas as a state and the effect, like the direct differences that would happen, like in terms of what the Fed does to them right now and what the Fed wouldn't be doing to them if they were independent, right? So if they were independent, first of all, Texas has oil wealth and they have a lot of other natural resource wealth. They're kind of like Canada. They're like Alberta in Canada, right? So if they separated right out of the gate, they'd be much wealthier. They would create commodity price inflations in neighboring states, and they would actually become wealthier. Another thing that would happen is federal laws that prevent them from acting in a conservative way. There's a whole gamut of things there, right? Would now no longer apply, which means it's not that they're super right-wing. They're definitely rotted. They have some really liberal cities, but they are generally a right-wing place. And just all else being equal, they're made more left-wing every day currently by the federal government's influence. So if you remove the influence of the federal government, overnight they become more right-wing. And overnight you get maybe not an exodus, but a marginal incremental uptick in liberal people leaving the state. I think that if you break away in that way, it's not a be-all, end-all solution, but you will see a crystallization of what Texas is. In one way, you could look at it like there's this. It's almost like Texas has been fucking. Oh, what's the word? It's a solution. Like
Penis.
Texas is penis. Yeah. No, Texas is a solution. You have all of these other fluids, all of these other cultures and concepts coming in that they don't, all of these other foreign bodies coming in that they don't want, right? From multiple borders in every direction, south mainly. But
we got there, ladies and gentlemen. We got there.
Here we are, finally, 2 hours. So no, you know what I mean, right?
Yeah.
Look, the border is a huge thing. Do you think Texas would be enforcing the border the same way if they didn't have the federal government? No, they would literally have 100-foot wall with miniguns.
Yeah.
So
that's actually a good point. I do need to get going now.
Okay. Scrambling.
Yeah, but also just end it. Just end it. This one point. So just to reaffirm, like, Hans Herman-Hoppe is not this sort of atomized, individualistic kind of Ayn Randian sort of guy.
No.
And it is very much about cooperation. And just one thing to end on. And this is why I think like neocons and a lot of American and Canadian libertarians get it wrong. The idea of, siding with corporations and like, oh, you can just vote with your feet or vote with your wallet, or almost like, I don't like something that's happening in the culture, I'm going to vote with my denial. But here's the thing, that is a privilege afforded to us, I believe, because we live in Canada and America, because of space. We actually live in countries where we can possibly vote with our feet because we got a lot of space to move around in. That's not the reality for much of Europe, much of South America. Let's say going forward, let's say population doesn't decline, because it's not going to. The very concept of voting with your feet is going to end up like voting with your dollar, where the system is going to be so fucking crowded and crazy, you're not going to be able to do it. So there's going to be eventually nowhere to walk to get away from it, and that's kind of where I'm kind of worried about. And the idea is like your entire. This is where I think libertarianism got twisted up, where the idea that voting with your feet is like you're always on the defense. You're always moving away. You're always being chased out of things, and they'll propose that as if that's a cool idea. Like, this is how things should be going. I'm getting chased out of spaces. I'll just go to a new space until I get chased out of that space. Then, but that's that's the system I like, and I have that freedom. I'm like, that's not going to be there forever. Like, that exists less and less the more crowded and the more divided and the more kind of segmented things get. So, like, just keep that in mind.
Yeah,
and that the selling point can't be to run. The selling point can't be just to go further underground.
Well, the great thing about voting with dollars is you don't have to move. You just pay. You just pay for votes. And you know what paying for votes is? It essentially means voting based on property rights, which is
vote with your dollar. You go to a voting booth with like a dollar bill and just write Trump on it and put it in. All right.
Orange man. Okay.
I gotta go. I'll talk to you later, man.
See you, man.
Bye bye.